Okay, so guys, we're barreling down page 23, and then page 24 is the end. So let's wrap this thing up. All right, I'm having fun. So Socrates says here, and Phaedrus, of course, because Phaedrus is an idiot and he always agrees with everything Socrates says. Far nobler, certainly. And now, Phaedrus, having agreed upon the premises, we decide about the conclusion. Premises is the stuff at the beginning, conclusion is the stuff at the end. So he says, now that we agree on all these things, because Phaedrus keeps agreeing him, he says, let's decide on the conclusions. What about conclusion? And what conclusion? And Socrates says, about Lysias, whom we censured, meaning we didn't like him. We said he was bad. The conclusion about Lysias, whom we censured, and his art of writing and discourses, and the rhetorical skill or want of skill which was shown in them, right? So he says, now we can conclude, because this whole conversation was about Lysias. And we said Lysias was an idiot. And his writing and his discourses, his rhetorical skill, that's fancy talk to trick people, persuasive talk, or want of skill which was shown in them. These are the questions which we sought to determine, and they brought us to this point. And I think that we are now pretty well informed about the nature of art, that's skill, the skill of public speaking, and its opposite, meaning because the nature of art and its opposite, meaning the nature of using words the wrong way and the right way. Yes, I think with you. But I wish that you would repeat what you said. So remember, you guys know this in your papers, right? What do you do in the conclusion of an essay? You kind of summarize everything you said before. So now in the conclusion of Plato's book, Phaedrus says, Socrates, why don't you repeat all of the conclusions so that we can have them all in one place? And so Socrates does just what I tell you to do, which is he repeats all of his main points in this last section here. I wish you would repeat what you had said. And here's Socrates' big conclusion. Until a man knows the truth of the several particulars of which he is writing or speaking, and is able to define them as they are, and having defined them again to divide them until they can no longer be divided, and until in like manner he is able to discern the nature of the soul, and discover the different modes of discourse which are adapted to different natures, and to arrange and dispose them in such a way that the simple form of speech may be addressed to the simple nature, and the complex and composite to the more complex nature. Until he has accomplished all of this, he will be unable to handle arguments according to the rules of art, as far as their nature allows them to be subject to art, for either the purpose of teaching or persuading. Such is the view which is implied in the whole preceding argument. So he just lists off, this is a summary. Now, I don't need to spend a lot of time on this because we already did it. But he says, what is the conclusion? He says, in conclusion, to properly use words, you've got to know the truth of whatever you're saying, whatever you're writing or speaking. You better know the truth about it. These sophists, these Lysias and rhetoric, these guys don't know the truth. They just say shit. You got to know the truth. You got to be able to define them. And if you divide, and if they're complicated, you better be able to divide them into sections and define each section. You have to understand the nature of the soul, meaning the minds of your audience. And you have to discover the different modes of discourse, the different ways of speaking, which are adapted to different natures, right? You talk differently to different audiences. You got to arrange and dispose them in a way that the simple form of speech is addressed to the simpler nature, the complex to the complex, right? You got to be able to put your ideas, if you're talking to an audience who's confused, you better be able to simplify. If you're talking to an audience who's advanced, you better be able to get more complicated to keep their attention, right? Socrates says you got to know the truth and you got about your subject, and you got to know the truth about the souls of your audience. Are they following you? Can they understand what you're saying? Is that a good place to put your knowledge? He says, until he has accomplished all this, he will be unable to handle arguments according to the rules of art, as far as their nature allows them to be subject to art, either for the purpose of teaching or persuading. Right? So he says, you got to know how to do all this stuff. Phaedrus says, yes, that was our view, certainly. And Socrates says, secondly, as to the censure, that's like, the word censure is like being mean to somebody. Because remember, they censured Lysias, meaning they said bad things about Lysias. To censure someone is to sort of say, here's what you did wrong. Second, as to the censure which was passed on the speaking or writing discourses, meaning they said bad things about writing, and how they might be rightly or wrongly censured. Did not our previous argument show what? See, Phaedrus is pretty interested. He cuts him off because he wants the answer. Whether Lysias or any other writer that ever was or will be, whether a private gentleman or statesman, proposes laws, so becomes the author of a political treatise, like a book on politics. Fancying that there is any great certainty and clearness in his performance, the fact of his writing is only a disgrace to him, whatever men may say. Because Socrates says writing is a disgrace. He thinks it's just worthless. So that these people, Lysias or whatever, who write their speeches down, he says writing is a disgrace to them, whatever men may say. Lots of people like writing. Whatever people say. Lots of people say writing's great. Socrates doesn't agree. For not to know the nature of justice and injustice and good and evil, this is those higher heavenly things we talked about, not to be able to distinguish the dream from the reality, cannot in truth be otherwise than disgraceful to him, even though he has the applause of the whole world. So he says, when people write things down, they get a lot of compliments for their writing. He says, but they don't deserve it. They may get compliments from people, but if you don't know those higher heavenly things, if you're not writing about something that really matters, then you haven't really done anything. And even though people may like it, there's more to life than that. So he thinks he thinks writing is worthless. It's really not good. All right, cool. So let's see what else. Yeah, and Phaedrus says certainly, and Socrates says, but he who thinks that the written word is there he that thinks in the written word there's necessarily much which is not serious, and that neither poetry nor prose spoken or written is of any great value, if, like the compositions of the rhapsodes, they are only recited in order to be believed, and not with any view toward criticism or instruction. So he says, people think words are great, but if you're just using words to persuade people rather than to communicate higher heavenly things like truth, beauty, goodness, justice, all those big things, then he says it's a waste, and it's not serious. And he says, okay. He says those people should understand that if you're not connected to those higher heavenly things, it's a waste. They're only if you're only reciting things so that people will believe you, that's not so good. It's supposed to be about instruction. And he who thinks that even the best of writings are but as a reminiscence of what we know. Gotta remember, writing's useful for remembering shit, but not for really teaching. And that only in principles of justice and goodness and nobility, taught and communicated orally, right? You gotta say it out loud and talk to people for the sake of instruction and graven on the soul, right? Not graven on paper, not graven on stone. You got to put it in people's souls by speaking to them, which is the only true way of writing, right? Real writing is when you talk to people and put it in their soul, not put it down on a piece of paper. And he says, is there a clearness and perfection and seriousness, and that such principles are a man's own and legitimate offspring, being in the first place the word which he finds in his own bosom and his own heart, secondly the brethren and descendants of relations of his to others, and who cares for them and no others. This is the right sort of man, and you and I, Phaedrus, would pray that we may become like him. He says that is most assuredly my desire and prayer, and he says I hope that we can be like this person who knows that writing is just for fun, just for helping you remember shit, but that real knowledge is spoken. And that words should not be used to persuade people. They should be used to get at the truth, these higher heavenly things like beauty and love and justice and all of these kinds of bigger issues. Yeah, okay. And we're just about done. I'm actually going to stop that right there. And yeah, okay, we're going to pick this up in a little bit. Almost done, guys.